They said it was just another trial, a simple case of fraud. But when the German Shepherd barked, everything changed. Inside that courtroom, justice had grown quiet, buried under lies, papers, and polished smiles. Then came a sound that shattered it all. It wasn't just a bark. It was an accusation, a memory, a truth clawing its way back into the light. No one understood at first. Not the judge, not the jury. But the little girl did. She froze, eyes wide, because she knew that sound wasn't random. The dog had smelled something familiar, something that shouldn't have been there. What followed wasn't just an investigation. It was redemption. A story about how truth finds a way to speak, even when humans can't. About a dog whose loyalty reached beyond the grave. And about a man who learned that sometimes, to find justice, you have to trust the instincts of the one partner who never lies. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood, old paper, and something colder. Anticipation. Late afternoon light poured through tall windows, bending into long, solemn shadows that stretched across the floor like silent witnesses. The ceiling fans hummed quietly, stirring the heavy air, while the clock above the judge's bench ticked in deliberate rhythm, each second marking the weight of expectation. Officer Daniels sat upright on the bench reserved for the department, his uniform crisp but his eyes weary. Beside him, resting on his haunches, was Rex, a full-grown German shepherd whose dark coat caught slivers of the fading sun. To anyone else, he looked calm, alert but composed. To Daniels, that stillness carried meaning. It was the quiet before a storm. Across the room, the defendant sat behind the polished oak table, flanked by his lawyer, Mr. Harlan. Harlan was the kind of man who wore confidence like armor. His suit fit perfectly, his smile seemed carved from marble, and even the way he smoothed his tie before speaking felt like a performance rehearsed 100 times. Every gesture radiated charm and control. On the witness bench, Emily sat nervously, small hands folded in her lap. Her shoes barely touched the floor. The 10-year-old girl looked fragile in the vastness of the room, too young to understand the complexities of fraud and legal motions, but old enough to feel the sting of whispers. Her father's name, Officer Reed, was the one tangled in this case, dragged through the mud after his death. Daniels stole a glance at her. There was something about Emily, the same quiet strength he'd once seen in Reed himself. Her eyes carried the same light, though now it flickered, behind grief. The judge entered. All rise. The courtroom rustled like a forest in wind. Papers, chairs, murmurs. Rex rose too, his tail lowering, ears pricking forward. His gaze didn't follow the judge, but the man standing just behind the defense table, Harlan. When everyone sat, Harlan leaned in to whisper to his client. The faint sound of his cologne drifted through the air, sharp, musky, with a trace of something familiar. Daniels didn't notice it at first, but Rex did. The dog's nose twitched, subtle. Then again. His breathing deepened slightly, chest expanding. His gaze locked, unmoving, calculating. Daniels felt the leash tug gently once, almost imperceptibly. He looked down. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, voice low. Rex didn't bark, didn't growl. He simply stared. Harlan rose to deliver his opening statement. His voice carried across the room, smooth, persuasive. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court, this case is built on confusion, on misplaced evidence, on stories told by grief rather than reason. Daniels only half listened. Something about the cadence of Harlan's words, the precision, the control, made his stomach tighten. Rex's posture changed. His front paws edged forward, muscles taut under his fur. Emily shifted slightly, glancing toward the dog. Her lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. For a moment, she tilted her head, as though the scent in the air reminded her of something too distant to name. The courtroom's stillness grew thick. Even the light seemed to hesitate, filtering through the blinds in narrow golden stripes that painted everyone's faces in contrasts of shadow and glare. The sound of the ticking clock returned, steady, intrusive. Daniels tried to focus on procedure. He knew the protocol: remain neutral, maintain control of the K9. But instincts were stubborn things. He'd worked with Rex for years, through chaos, blood, and silence. He trusted those instincts more than he trusted his own reflection. And now, those instincts whispered, "Danger!" Across the room, Harlan gestured with his hand, a deliberate, confident motion. A silver watch glimmered beneath his cuff. When he spoke, his voice carried that too-perfect tone, the kind that promised truth yet reeked of practiced deceit. Rex's ears flicked backward, then forward again. He let out a soft rumble deep in his throat, not loud enough for the court to hear, but enough to make Daniels's pulse quicken. "Easy, boy," he whispered, placing a hand on Rex's back. The dog's fur was warm, tense under his palm. Harlan turned toward Emily, softening his tone. "My dear, your father was a good man, wasn't he? None of us doubt that. But sometimes, people make mistakes." Emily's head dropped. Daniels clenched his jaw. The judge's gavel tapped once. "Mr. Harlan, please refrain from emotional appeals." "Of course, Your Honor," Harlan replied smoothly, though a faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. That smile, it was too controlled, too knowing. Daniels caught it, and so did Rex. The dog's pupils narrowed, nostrils flaring. His nose turned slightly, catching a drifting current of air that carried Harlan's scent. That was when Daniels noticed it too. The faint trace of Reed's cologne. A memory cut through the noise. Reed laughing in the precinct locker room. A light spritz of that same scent before heading out. Daniels hadn't smelled it since the man's funeral. Now it hung in the courtroom, like a ghost. Rex's tail lowered. His gaze locked on Harlan's hand as the man reached for a document. Daniels could feel the energy through the leash, a low, restrained tremor, the kind that precedes instinct taking over. The judge's voice droned in the background. Lawyers exchanged notes. To everyone else, it was a routine case. Nothing more than legal jargon and worn evidence. But beneath that mundane surface, something alive had stirred. Rex exhaled softly, then leaned forward, his nose brushing the edge of Daniels's knee, signaling recognition. Daniels froze. He knew that signal. It was how Rex marked a scent match during field tests. But here, in the solemn quiet of the courtroom, that realization felt impossible. He looked down at his partner, at those amber eyes sharp with memory. Rex didn't need words. He never did. And as the courtroom carried on, oblivious to the storm quietly forming at their feet, Daniels understood one thing with chilling clarity. Something in that room didn't belong. The courtroom had settled into the rhythm of legal monotony. The rustle of papers, the low hum of the ceiling fan, the rhythmic drone of voices weaving arguments no one fully believed. But beneath that calm, something had shifted. A current ran through the air, invisible but alive, threading between the benches, the railings, and the rows of restless spectators. Rex felt it first. He lay beside Officer Daniels, muscles taut beneath his coat. His head rested on his paws, but his eyes never left Mr. Harlan, the defense attorney, whose confidence filled the room like smoke. Every movement the man made carried that same polished ease, the same calculated charm, an actor in control of his stage. Then Harlan turned toward Emily. The little girl sat quietly on the witness stand, fingers tangled in the hem of her dress. Her eyes had grown tired. The light in them flickered between courage and confusion. She had spent hours under questioning, being asked about bank accounts, about signatures, about things no 10-year-old should ever have to know. "Emily," Harlan said softly, voice dipped in honey. "You've been very brave today." His tone was gentle, too gentle, the kind that sought trust before betrayal. He took a slow step forward, carrying the scent of his cologne with him. That same unmistakable fragrance, crisp and warm, echoing of a man long gone. Daniels noticed the shift in Rex's breathing before he noticed anything else. A quiet intake, a low tremor in the dog's chest. Rex's eyes sharpened, his body stilled, not in calm, but in focus. Daniels straightened, instincts stirring. Harlan continued speaking, stepping closer. "I know this must be hard. Losing someone you love, hearing people say terrible things about him." He reached the edge of the witness stand, resting one manicured hand on the wooden railing that separated him from Emily. It was a gesture rehearsed to look comforting. But to Rex, it was an invasion. The moment that hand landed, the world seemed to fracture. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from Rex's throat. Not the warning growl of a dog sensing threat, but the primal sound of recognition, something ancient and absolute. Then he barked. The first bark tore through the silence like a thunderclap. Then another, and another, sharp, fierce, unrelenting. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Chairs scraped, gasps echoed. The judge's gavel slammed down with desperate force. "Order! Order in the court!" But the sound was nothing compared to Rex's barks, each one hitting the walls like the pounding of a heart gone wild. Daniels yanked on the leash, instinctively trying to control him, but Rex's strength was immense. His body lunged forward, eyes locked on Harlan's hand. "Rex, heel!" Daniels commanded, voice low but urgent. The command, once sacred, barely reached the dog through the storm of emotion. Harlan stumbled back, color draining from his face. "Control your animal!" he shouted, voice cracking as he raised his arm defensively. But Daniels saw something else. He saw understanding flicker in the dog's gaze, an intelligence sharpened by years of training, bound by something deeper than instinct. Rex wasn't attacking. He was accusing. The courtroom froze in that strange tension between fear and awe. The judge's gavel hovered mid-air. Spectators held their breath. Then, amid the noise, a soft, trembling voice rose. "Emily." Her small hands gripped the edge of the bench. Her eyes were fixed, not on Rex, but on the lawyer's hand. "That smell," she whispered, barely audible. "It's my dad's." The words landed like a slow explosion. Daniels felt his pulse stutter. The entire room seemed to still, as if the air itself understood the weight of that realization. Rex barked again, louder, one final time. Each sound reverberating not in aggression, but in truth. Daniel's gaze snapped to Harlan. The man's calm mask faltered for the first time. His jaw tightened. A flicker of something, panic, guilt, fear, crossed his eyes. He tried to regain composure, clearing his throat, but his voice came out strained. "This is absurd. The animal is unstable." "Enough," the judge interrupted sharply, gavel trembling in his grip. "Remove the dog from the courtroom at once." But Daniels didn't move. His hand on the leash slackened just slightly, eyes never leaving Rex's. In that instant, something passed between man and dog. A silent exchange built over years of trust. Daniels realized what was happening. Rex wasn't losing control. He was remembering. Every bark carried recognition. The same scent that used to cling to Reed's uniform. The faint trace that had lingered in the locker room after his last day alive. That cologne, once comforting, now reeked of betrayal. Daniels spoke softly, almost reverently. "He knows you." The room went silent. Rex stood still now, chest heaving, gaze locked on Harlan with unwavering focus. He no longer barked. He didn't have to. The meaning had already been spoken, carved into the air. Emily turned toward Daniels, her eyes wide, wet with the fragile understanding of a child connecting grief to truth. "He's not angry," she said quietly. "He's telling us." Daniels nodded slowly, his throat tightening. "Yeah, he's telling us." The judge, still stunned, motioned for recess. "This court will reconvene in 30 minutes. His voice quivered slightly, uncharacteristically human. As people rose from their seats, whispers spread like wildfire. "Did you see that?" He barked at the crowd. "Oh, lawyer!" "What did the girl say?" But Daniels heard none of it. He knelt beside Rex, steadying the trembling animal. Beneath the fur, he could feel the rapid beat of a heart that had just carried the weight of truth. "You did good, partner," he whispered, running a hand over Rex's head. The dog leaned into his touch, finally exhaling, eyes soft but resolute. Across the room, Harlan adjusted his cufflinks with shaky hands, his mask cracking at the edges. For the first time, his confidence felt thin, paper armor against a truth he couldn't silence. Daniels looked up at him one last time, something cold settling in his chest. The seed of suspicion had been planted, and it would grow. Rex sat beside him, tail still, eyes unblinking, as if guarding something sacred. The judge's gavel struck once more, its echo hollow and trembling through the air. But the sound that lingered wasn't wood against wood. It was the memory of that bark, the sound of truth breaking through the noise. The night after the courtroom outburst, the city seemed quieter than usual. Rain pressed gently against the windows of the small safe house where Daniels and Rex were temporarily staying. The echoes of the day, the gavel, the gasps, the bark, still hung in Daniels's mind like smoke that refused to clear. He sat at the edge of the bed, uniform jacket draped over a chair, the glow of a desk lamp painting half his face in amber light. Papers were scattered before him, case files, photos, timelines, but his eyes weren't on them. They were fixed on the sleeping figure curled on the couch. Emily. She'd fallen asleep, clutching one of Rex's toys, a frayed tennis ball her father had once used during scent drills. The dog himself lay close to her, protective and still, his eyes half open even in rest. His loyalty was absolute, unspoken. Daniels leaned back, exhaling. The girl had been through too much already. The bark, the accusation, the scent, everything pointed to something darker beneath the surface. Yet the department wanted it buried. Quickly. Quietly. The ticking clock whispered the same question over and over. What really happened to Reed? It had started long before the courtroom, before the whispers and the rumors, before Emily's world cracked open. In her dreams, her father was still alive. The flashback began not with sight, but with scent, warm coffee, leather, and the faint cologne that clung to his uniform collar. Officer Reed knelt in the backyard, sunlight glinting off the badge clipped to his belt, laughing as Rex, a younger, wilder version, bounded across the grass. "Again, boy," Reed called, waving a cloth soaked with the scent of his own shirt. "Find it." Rex darted toward the hedge, nose buried in the ground, tail wagging furiously. He emerged seconds later, cloth clenched in his teeth. Reed grinned. "Good boy. That's my partner." From the porch, a much younger Emily clapped her hands, her small voice bubbling with joy. "Daddy, he's so smart." Reed chuckled, walking over to ruffle her hair. "Smart, yeah, but stubborn too. Just like you." The girl giggled, reaching out to pet Rex's head. "He remembers everything, doesn't he?" Reed nodded, his smile softening. "A good dog never forgets, sweetheart, especially the people he loves." That moment, sunlight, laughter, the bond between man, child, and dog, burned itself into memory. It was the kind of day that felt endless, but nothing lasts forever. The memory dissolved into sound, whispers, faint adult voices slipping through half-open doors. Emily stood in the hallway weeks after her father's funeral. The house was colder, emptier. The walls still smelled faintly of his cologne. The furniture still arranged the same way. Yet the people who came to help brought with them words like knives. "It's tragic, really," one voice murmured. "But if the rumors are true, maybe he wasn't as clean as everyone thought." "Money from seized accounts," another whispered. "Transfers that don't match the reports. They'll never admit it publicly, of course, but internal affairs." Emily's breath caught. She pressed her small hands over her ears, but the words leaked through anyway. Rumors, corruption, betrayal. Her chest hurt in a way she couldn't describe. She ran to her room, shut the door, and sank to the floor, trembling. Rex pushed his nose against her hand, whining softly. "They're lying," she whispered fiercely, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Daddy wasn't like that. You know he wasn't." Rex licked her cheek, pressing closer. A silent vow in fur and warmth. Back in the present, Daniels sifted through Reed's old case logs. His hands moved automatically, but his mind replayed every moment of that trial. Emily's voice, the bark, the smell. He'd known Reed for years. The man was strict, precise, honorable. If there were irregularities in those accounts, someone had planted them. Someone clever enough to make it believable. His radio buzzed suddenly, breaking the silence. It was Lieutenant Briggs from Internal Affairs. "Daniels, let it go," the voice came through, clipped and tired. "The department's closing the file. There's nothing left to chase." Daniels frowned. "Sir, with all due respect, something's off. The lawyer, Harlan, he—" "Enough." The tone sharpened. You saw what happened today. That dog nearly derailed a federal case. The press is already circling. The last thing we need is you chasing ghosts." The line clicked dead. Daniels stared at the radio, jaw tight. Ghosts, he thought bitterly. If only it were that simple. He looked down at Rex, who was now awake, head lifted, eyes watching him quietly. The dog didn't need words. His loyalty was a compass that pointed toward the truth. Daniels sighed and turned back to the files, his voice low. "We'll check everything, boy. Every record. Every scent log. If Reed was framed, we'll prove it." Rex's tail gave a faint thump in reply. Hours later, the apartment fell silent again. The storm outside had passed, leaving only the hum of streetlights and the faint drip of water from the eaves. Emily stirred on the couch, her small voice breaking the quiet. "Officer Daniels?" He looked over. "Yeah, kiddo?" "People keep saying bad things about Dad." Her voice trembled, the innocence of it slicing straight through him. "Were they true?" Daniels hesitated, words heavy in his throat. "No," he said finally, gently. "Sometimes people talk when they don't understand. Your dad was a good man." Emily nodded slowly, her gaze shifting to Rex. "He remembers Daddy, doesn't he?" Daniels smiled faintly. "Yeah, I think he does." That night, long after Daniels had drifted into uneasy sleep, Emily awoke again. The moonlight spilled through the window, silvering the edges of the room. Rex lay by the door, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Quietly, she climbed out of bed, carrying a small piece of bread she'd saved from dinner. She sat on the floor or beside him, offering it in her tiny palm. "Here, boy," she whispered. "You remember Dad, don't you?" Rex looked at her for a long moment before lowering his head into her lap. His breath was warm, steady. She felt the weight of his loyalty press against her heart. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling silently as she stroked his fur. "He's still here, right? You can still smell him." Rex didn't answer. He didn't need to. His quiet stillness was answer enough. The moonlight caught the reflection in his eyes, and for one fleeting second, Emily could almost believe she saw her father there, smiling, proud, unforgotten. The following morning, the precinct smelled of disinfectant and coffee, clean on the surface but stale underneath. Officer Daniels walked through the quiet corridors, his boots echoing softly on the tiles. It was early. The sun had just begun to seep through the frosted windows, painting pale stripes across the walls. Rex padded beside him, his nails clicking against the floor. No one spoke to them. After the courtroom incident, eyes turned away when they passed. The whispers had started again, just like they once did about Reed. Daniels ignored them. He'd been replaying the same thought all night. That smell. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. He pushed open the door to the evidence archive, a windowless room filled with rows of metal cabinets and the hum of old ventilation. Dust motes drifted lazily in the air. He signed his name into the logbook, the clerk barely looking up. Inside, the smell of cold paper and chemical preservative filled the air. Daniels set down his folder and pulled on a pair of gloves. Rex sat by the door, eyes following every move. "All right, partner," Daniels murmured. "Let's see what they didn't want us to find." Reed's case file should have been simple, closed, indexed, archived. But when Daniels opened the metal drawer labeled K9 Operations, 2017 to 2020, he saw it immediately. One file tab slightly out of place, the name Reed T marked in fading ink. He pulled it out. Inside were reports, scent samples sealed in clear plastic, old photos from training sessions. Everything looked standard, until he noticed the gap. The scent reference card, the small cotton pad stored from each officer's locker for identification use, was missing. Daniels frowned. Where the hell? He flipped through the sheets again. Nothing. Every handler had one. It was protocol, used to verify matches in scent tracking or contamination checks. Losing it wasn't just sloppy, it was deliberate. Rex tilted his head, picking up on Daniels' tension. His ears flicked, tail still. Daniels whispered, "You smell that?" The dog sniffed the air, moving toward the open drawer. He nosed the space where the missing bag should have been, then sat down, signaling negative detection. No trace left. Someone had removed it carefully. Recently. Daniels exhaled slowly, unease tightening in his chest. Someone's been cleaning up after themselves. He moved to the computer terminal in the corner. The ancient machine hummed to life. He inserted Reed's old bodycam archive drive, a copy Daniels had quietly pulled weeks before the case was buried. The screen flickered, showing fragmented recordings. Routine patrols, friendly exchanges. Then one final clip titled, April 14th, Personal Transfer. Daniels clicked play. The footage was grainy, distorted by glare from the late afternoon sun. Reed's voice came through faintly. "Appreciate the help, man. Just a few more boxes." The camera tilted down, showing the trunk of his car, half filled with folders, equipment, and a sealed crate marked Confidential, Departmental Finance Records. Another figure entered the frame, blurred, indistinct. He wore a police-issued jacket, but the name tag was obscured. The camera caught only fragments, a hand gripping a box, a flash of a watch, and, well, most clearly, a pair of boots. Thick, black, department issue. But the soles, those were unique. Reinforced ridges, tactical grip. Daniels had seen them before. In court. On Harlan. He paused the video, zooming in on the frame. The boots filled the screen, blurred by motion but unmistakable. His pulse quickened. The air in the archive room felt colder. Rex stood, ears perked, watching him with quiet alertness. Daniels whispered to himself, "It's him." He grabbed his phone, snapping photos of the screen. He knew what he was doing was risky, but the truth had already been twisted once. He wasn't about to let it happen again. When he left the archive room, Briggs was waiting outside. The lieutenant leaned against the wall, arms folded, eyes hard. "I heard you were digging around," Briggs said flatly. Daniels kept his voice steady. "Just verifying old records." Briggs's gaze dropped to the folder in Daniels's hand. "Reed's case is closed. You know that." "I think it shouldn't be," Daniels replied. "His scent file's missing, and I found body cam footage showing someone else helping him move financial records. Someone with department boots." Briggs straightened. "You're reaching." "Am I?" Daniels held up his phone, showing the photo of the paused video frame. "That's not a random civilian, sir. Those are police-grade souls. And if I'm right about the pattern—" "Enough!" Briggs's tone cut sharp. "Drop it, Daniels. I'm ordering you." Daniels stared at him. "You don't even want to look?" Briggs's jaw tightened. Internal Affairs already reviewed it. The man's dead. You'll only drag his daughter through more pain. And that dog, he nodded toward Rex, who had stepped closer protectively. That animal's already caused enough trouble. Dogs don't make testimonies. For a moment, silence. Only the soft hum of the hallway lights. Then Daniels said quietly, "Maybe not, sir. But they remember." Briggs's expression flickered, just for a second, before he turned away. "Watch yourself, Daniels." The sound of his boots faded down the corridor, leaving a silence heavy with unfinished truths. That evening, the rain returned. Daniels drove out to the old cemetery on the edge of town where Reed's grave lay beneath a crooked willow tree. The headlights carved two pale lines through the mist as he parked. He stepped out, the rain soaking his uniform instantly. Rex followed without hesitation, paws sinking into the wet earth. The headstone was simple. Thomas Reed, husband, father, officer. Daniels crouched, brushing away fallen leaves. "They're still talking about you, old friend," he said softly. "Still calling you dirty." Rex sat beside him, tail tucked, eyes on the stone. The rain slicked his fur, but he didn't move. Daniels placed a hand on his neck. "I found something," he whispered. "A piece of the puzzle. Maybe the start of it." The wind howled through the trees, carrying the faint scent of wet soil and fading flowers. "You didn't deserve this," Daniels continued. "You gave everything to that badge, and they buried you twice, once in the ground, once in rumor." Rex shifted closer, pressing his head gently against Daniels' shoulder. It was the same gesture he used to give Reed, the same silent comfort, the same memory rekindled. Daniels' voice broke slightly as he looked at the grave. "We'll clear your name, Tom. I promise." Rex let out a soft whine, the kind that carried grief more honest than words. Together, they stood in the rain, two silhouettes against the storm. One man, one dog, both bound by loyalty to a man the world had already forgotten. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating their faces for a heartbeat. And in that flash, it was as if Reed himself stood beside them once more, smiling faintly, silent witness to the vow that had just been made. The city slept under a sheen of silver rain. Streetlights glimmered across wet pavement, and the hum of distant traffic faded into the dark, like an old secret trying to hide itself. Inside a penthouse that overlooked the skyline, Mr. Harlan loosened his tie. The courtroom charm, the flawless composure, all of it peeled away the moment the door clicked shut behind him. He stood for a moment in silence, the city glittering beyond the glass wall of his living room. The apartment was immaculate, too clean, too deliberate. The kind of order built not from peace but from fear of chaos. He poured himself a drink, a measured 2 fingers of scotch, and set it on the counter. Then he reached for a small black box that sat beneath a cabinet light. Inside, nestled in dark velvet, lay a police medal, tarnished with time. The inscription read, "Officer Thomas Reed, Distinguished Service." For a long moment, Harlan stared at it. The medal caught the dim light, glinting like an accusation. He ran a thumb over the engraved letters, his reflection warped in the curved metal. The irony wasn't lost on him. The medal didn't belong here, and it didn't belong to him. Years ago, before tailored suits and courtroom speeches, Harlan had worn the same badge. He and Reed had shared the same patrol car, the same coffee breaks, the same long nights under flickering streetlights. Reed had been the golden one, respected, admired, always by the book. Harlan had been almost. He remembered the night it all unraveled. A report went missing. Evidence misplaced. A small sum skimmed from a seized account. Just enough to help him get by. Or so he'd told himself. Reed had found out. "You think this is a game?" Reed's voice had thundered in the empty precinct locker room, echoing off the metal doors. "You can't talk your way out of theft, Harlan. Not here." But Reed hadn't reported him. Not that night. He'd given him a chance. One last chance. Harlan hadn't taken it. When internal affairs came knocking, Reed told them only half the truth. He said Harlan had made a mistake, that it could be corrected. He spared him. Harlan was discharged quietly. Reputation fractured but not destroyed. He'd built a new life. Reshaped himself as a defense attorney. Polished. Articulate. Unshakable. But that night had never left him. And neither had Reed's mercy. So when Reed died years later, everything in Harlan's world twisted again. The opportunity came like a whisper, a chance to hide his new trail of crimes behind an old friend's name. He'd used Reed's credentials to open hidden accounts, shift funds, bury evidence in someone else's shadow. It was supposed to be foolproof. The dead couldn't defend themselves. But now, the dog had barked. The sound still haunted him, that deep guttural echo from the courtroom. The moment Rex's growl sliced through his mask. Harlan downed the scotch in one swallow, but the memory didn't fade. It looped in his mind. The dog's eyes, the way they had burned through him as if they saw everything. He moved to the mirror above the fireplace and caught his reflection. The suit, the smooth hair, the expensive watch. All the armor of a man who'd built his life on image. But beneath it, his eyes told another story. They looked tired, cornered. He turned away and walked down the hallway to his study. On the wall hung certificates, awards, framed newspaper clippings. Harlan wins landmark case. Defense attorney overturns conviction. Below them on the desk sat a bottle of cologne. The same brand Reed had always worn. He uncapped it. The scent spilled into the air, warm, sharp, nostalgic. He inhaled deeply, eyes closing for a second too long. It used to remind him of respect, of the days when he'd stood beside Reed as an equal. Now, it smelled like punishment. He muttered to himself, voice hoarse, "I'm not him. I'm not him." But the lie rang hollow. On his desk lay the financial ledgers, coded transactions, falsified transfers, digital ghosts of every decision that had chained him further to his sin. He'd built an empire from deceit, yet all it took was one bark to make it tremble. He tried to focus on the numbers, but his mind refused. Each tick of the clock grew louder. The rain against the windows grew heavier. He could almost hear it again. The bark, distant but clear, rising through the storm outside. He pressed his palms to his ears. Stop it! But it didn't. In the silence of his home, the echo of Rex's growl filled the corners, alive in his head. The sound wasn't just memory. It was judgment. He stumbled to the liquor cabinet, hands trembling. The glass clinked against the bottle as he poured another drink, spilling some on the floor. "It's just a dog," he muttered. "Just a damn dog." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. It wasn't the dog he feared. It was what the dog recognized. The phone rang suddenly, slicing through the tension. He flinched, staring at the screen. The caller ID read, Lieutenant Briggs. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he answered. Yes? Briggs's voice was low, urgent. You need to keep your head down. Daniels is digging. He's not letting go. Harlan's throat tightened. He has nothing. He might, Briggs said. He's asking about Reed's scent records. He's rewatching body cam footage. A pause. The sound of the rain deepened. I told you this would stay buried, Harlan said, voice trembling now. You promised. Promises don't last forever, Briggs replied coldly. Then the line went dead. Harlan stood frozen, phone still in hand. The walls seemed to close in. He walked back to the glass case, staring again at Reed's medal. His reflection warped across the metal surface. Two faces overlapping. The man he pretended to be, and the one he truly was. He whispered, voice barely audible. You should have let me fall, Tom. The city lights flickered outside. Thunder rolled. He pressed his hand against the glass, fingers trembling. Beneath his touch, the metal gleamed. A small, cold sun that refused to fade. Behind him, the echo of Rex's bark filled the silence again. Not loud this time, but distant, as if carried by the wind itself. Harlan's breath caught. He turned toward the window, searching the storm. Nothing but rain. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, that dog still remembered, still knew. And for the first time in years, the man who had built his life on control felt something he couldn't argue away. Fear. The precinct after midnight felt like another world. Hollow, sleepless, haunted by whispers of things long buried. Most of the lights were off, except for a few dim fluorescents that hummed overhead, flickering like tired eyes refusing to close. Officer Daniels moved through the corridor quietly, his boots landing on the floor in near-silent rhythm. Rex trotted beside him, every muscle alert, his movement smooth and soundless. They shouldn't have been there. Not at this hour, not after Briggs's warning. But there were questions that wouldn't stop burning, and Daniels had never been the kind of man to ignore the fire. The door ahead bore the faded label, Archive Storage, Authorized Personnel Only. Daniels hesitated just long enough to glance down the hall, then swiped his old keycard. The light flicked from red to green with a soft click. Quiet, boy, he whispered. Rex's ears flicked once, acknowledgement. Together, they slipped inside. The room was colder than the corridors. Steel filing cabinets lined the walls like silent sentinels, their drawers filled with forgotten fragments of other people's truths. The air smelled of dust, metal, and old paper. And something else. Something faint, but familiar. Rex raised his nose, sniffing deeply, his tail lowered, body tense with focus. Daniels felt it instantly, that subtle change in posture, the quiet hum of instinct taking over. You've got something, Daniels murmured. He knelt, opening the first drawer. Files on narcotics, closed homicide cases, disciplinary records, all cataloged and forgotten. He flipped through labels until one caught his eye. Evidence. 2017. Reed, Thomas. His pulse kicked. He pulled the box out and placed it on the table, brushing off a layer of dust. Across the lid, in faded marker, someone had scribbled, "Discarded." Who discards a dead officer's evidence? He muttered, Time 700 sos. He lifted the lid. Inside were fragments of Reed's career, a half-burned field report, an old ID card, a training ribbon. But one compartment was empty, the missing scent pad. Daniels exhaled sharply. Damn it! Then Rex moved. The dog nosed through the side of the box, pushing against the cardboard edge. His tail gave a small twitch, the signal of detection. Daniels leaned closer, watching. Rex pawed once, then gently nudged something out from beneath the divider. A cloth tag, frayed, stained, with faint embroidered letters barely visible in the dim light. Reed T. Daniels froze. He picked it up carefully, holding it under the flickering fluorescent. The tag smelled faintly of age, but beneath it lingered something else, the unmistakable trace of that same cologne. Reed's scent. And maybe someone else's. Rex let out a low whine, not of fear, but recognition. This was hidden, Daniel said softly. Someone meant for this to disappear. He placed the tag into a small plastic evidence pouch from his pocket. The weight of it felt heavier than cloth. It was proof. Proof that Reed's life had been tampered with, his legacy rewritten. For the first time, Daniels felt a flicker of victory. But it didn't last. A door slammed somewhere down the hall. Voices echoed faintly. Who's in the archive? Daniel's breath caught. He glanced at Rex. We're out of time. He stuffed the pouch into his jacket and shut the box. Footsteps approached, quick, purposeful. Internal Affairs Night Patrol. Rex growled softly, the sound rumbling in his chest like thunder waiting to break. Not yet, Daniels whispered. He scanned the room and no back exit. Only a narrow row between the cabinets and a ventilation grate high on the wall. The door handle rattled. Last chance, a voice called. Open up! Daniels grabbed Rex's leash and slipped behind the filing cabinets. The door burst open, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. Archive room clear? One officer asked. The other moved forward, light sweeping dangerously close. Daniels held his breath. Rex didn't move. His discipline was absolute. Looks clear, the first voice muttered. Could have sworn we heard something. The beam lingered on the table for one agonizing second, then turned away. The door shut again, footsteps retreating down the corridor. Daniels waited. 10 seconds. 20. Only the hum of the lights remained. He exhaled shakily. Good boy, he whispered, giving Rex a quiet pat. They slipped out the back corridor, moving fast but silent. By the time they reached the parking lot, the rain had started again. Cold, steady, relentless. Daniels climbed into his car, breathing hard. The tag sat on the passenger seat, glistening under the dashboard light. Rex settled beside it, paw resting gently on the pouch, almost protective. Daniels looked at him, a faint smile breaking through the tension. You found it, he said softly. You actually found it. Rex blinked, tail flicking once. The moment was fragile, but it carried weight. The feeling of something lost, finally beginning to resurface. The triumph lasted less than 12 hours. By morning, Daniels was summoned to Briggs's office. The air in the room felt heavy the moment he entered. Briggs didn't look up from the paperwork in front of him. Sit. Daniels sat. Rex stayed by his side, silent as stone. Briggs finally raised his eyes. You were in the archives last night. It wasn't a question. Daniels kept his voice steady. I found something, sir. Evidence tied to Reed. His tag was in a box labeled discarded. That's not procedure. Briggs's gaze hardened. You had no authorization. With respect, sir. With respect, officer, Briggs interrupted, slamming a folder shut. You've tampered with sealed evidence. You compromised a federal review case. Daniels stood, anger breaking through his restraint. I uncovered what you buried. The truth about Reed, about Harlan. Enough! Briggs roared. The silence that followed was deafening, then softer. Turn in your badge. Daniels stared at him, disbelief washing over him like cold rain. You can't. I just did. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Daniels reached for the badge pinned to his chest, pulling it free. The metal gleamed under the office light before he set it down. Rex watched him quietly, as if sensing the shift, the loss of something sacred. Briggs looked away. Go home, Daniels. You're suspended until further notice. Daniels turned to leave, shoulders heavy, the weight of the truth pressing harder than the badge ever had. Outside, the rain fell harder. He opened the car door, sat behind the wheel, and looked at Rex. The dog stared back, eyes steady, unbroken. On the seat between them lay the small pouch, the uniform tag glistening faintly. Rex placed his paw on it again, deliberate, certain. Daniel's throat tightened. Yeah, he whispered. We're not done yet. Lightning flashed in the distance, cutting across the sky like the beginning of a reckoning, and in that brief light, the reflection of the tag shimmered, not just as proof, but as promise. The storm began like a whisper, a low growl rolling through the clouds before splitting into thunder. By midnight, the kennel was alive with the sound of rain slamming against metal and glass. Lightning flashed, white and brutal, illuminating rows of cages that trembled with fear and confusion. In the far corner, Rex lay awake. He hadn't slept since the night Daniels left. His body was still, but his ears twitched with every rumble. Rainwater leaked through the ceiling, forming a thin stream that trickled across the concrete floor, glistening under the pale flicker of fluorescent lights. Then came the crack of thunder that shook the ground. A power surge flickered through the building. Lights went out. The hum of the electric locks died. The world went dark. Rex lifted his head. The scent of ozone filled the air. Something inside him, that old instinct honed by years beside Daniels, stirred. He rose to his feet, nose twitching. The air was alive with memory. And then, quietly, he pushed. The latch on his kennel door wasn't fully secure after the power flicker. With one shove, it creaked open. A second push, it swung free. He stepped into the corridor, lightning slicing the darkness. The rain had blown one of the side doors ajar, the wind howling through the gap. He paused only a moment, looking back, as if asking permission from the ghost of Reed, or perhaps from the man who'd taught him loyalty itself. Then he ran, out into the storm. Rain lashed against his fur, cold and merciless. But Rex didn't slow. His paws splashed through puddles as he followed the faintest thread of scent. Not food, not blood, but something deeper, familiar. Daniels. It was there, buried beneath the city's chaos, the echo of sweat, gunpowder, and the quiet warmth of trust. A scent etched in memory, impossible to forget. Time Lightning lit the streets in fragments. The storm blurred the world into streaks of gray and gold, reflections of streetlights bending across flooded asphalt. Rex moved like a shadow through it all, slipping between alleys, cutting through the night with a sense of purpose that bordered on holy. He didn't know where Daniels was, but instinct did. In a small apartment on the edge of downtown, Daniels sat slumped in his chair, one hand pressed against his ribs. A bruise the size of a fist darkened his side, a gift from a bar fight that wasn't really about beer or pride, but about anger that had nowhere to go. The table before him was littered with half-empty bottles, old reports, and the faded photo of a man in uniform beside a little girl and a German shepherd. Reed, Emily, Rex, the family he'd lost twice over. Outside, thunder rolled again. The window rattled. He looked up, dazed. Then, a sound. At first it was faint, drowned by the rain. A low, familiar bark. Daniels blinked, setting the bottle down slowly. "No," he muttered. "Can't be." Another bark, louder this time. Desperate. Alive. He stumbled to the door, flung it open, and there he was. Rex. Soaked to the bone, fur plastered to his body, eyes blazing through the rain. For a moment, they both froze, man and dog, staring across the distance of heartbreak. Then Rex bounded forward, slamming into Daniels with such force it nearly knocked him back. Daniels caught him, dropping to his knees, his hands tangled in the wet fur as Rex whined and licked his face, tail thrashing wildly. "You found me again," Daniels whispered, his voice cracking. "You damn miracle, you found me." He pressed his forehead to Rex's, eyes closing. The storm roared outside, but in that moment, it felt like silence. A reunion written not in words, but in breath and heartbeat. When he finally pulled back, Rex was already pacing, restless, insistent. He barked once, looking toward the open window. Daniels frowned. "What is it? What are you trying to—" Another bark, sharper this time. Rex turned toward the door, tail stiff, nose flaring against the wind. Daniels understood. "You've got a trail." He grabbed his jacket, wincing at the pain in his ribs, and followed. "All right, partner," he said, voice firming. "Lead the way." The streets blurred beneath them. Rain hammered down in sheets, lightning flashing across puddles like veins of light. Rex ran ahead, nose low, every movement charged with memory. Daniels followed, adrenaline cutting through exhaustion. They moved through narrow alleys and under bridges, following the scent of that familiar cologne, the one that had haunted them since the courtroom. It led them east, toward the docks. Daniels's mind raced. It made sense. Harlan had the connections, the offshore accounts, the means to disappear. The scent was stronger now, sharp even through the storm. Rex barked once, veering toward a row of abandoned warehouses. Then they saw it, a flicker of orange light in the distance. Fire. They ran. Inside one of the warehouses, Harlan stood by a metal barrel, flames rising high as he fed it document after document. The heat licked at his face, sweat and rain mingling on his skin. "Almost done," he muttered, tossing in another file. "Almost gone." Then Rex's bark split the air, fierce, echoing through the rafters. Harlan spun around, eyes wide. His hand went to the gun on his belt. Daniels stepped from the shadows, drenched, his voice low and steady. "Step away from the fire, Harlan." "You!" Harlan hissed, raising the gun. You don't know when to quit. Rex growled, body coiled, eyes locked on the target. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the three of them. The lawman stripped of his badge, the lawyer stripped of his mask, and the dog who carried the memory of truth. Put it down, Daniels warned. Harlan's hand trembled. You can't prove anything. Daniels gestured toward the barrel. You just tried to burn what I needed. Thunder cracked. Harlan fired. The bullet tore past Daniels' splintering wood. Rex lunged. Pure instinct, pure loyalty, tackling Harlan to the ground. The gun slid across the floor. Harlan struggled beneath the weight of him, shouting, cursing. Rex, no! Daniels commanded, voice sharp through the chaos. The dog froze, teeth bared, breath heaving, but he didn't bite. Instead, he held the man pinned, growling low and steady. Daniels approached slowly, picking up the gun. He pointed it down, voice cold. You're done, Harlan. Outside, the storm raged. Lightning struck the dock, bathing the scene in blinding white. And when the light faded, the truth stood unhidden. The lawyer trembling in defeat. The dog standing guard. And the man who had lost everything finally standing for what mattered most. Daniels holstered the gun and looked at Rex. Good boy, he said softly. Rex's tail moved once, just once, before he sat beside him, rain pouring down like redemption. The storm had not passed. It only paused to catch its breath. Rain hissed against the warehouse roof, drumming on the metal like a heartbeat that wouldn't stop. Smoke from the burning papers curled toward the rafters, heavy with the stench of ash and guilt. Harlan stood half in shadow, half in flame, a figure carved by greed and fear. His suit clung to him, soaked through, and his eyes flicked between Daniels and Rex. Calculating, desperate. Daniels, soaked and bruised, stood his ground. His hand hovered near his sidearm, but the exhaustion in his face made it clear. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about ending it. Drop the gun, Harlan, Daniels said quietly. Harlan's laugh was sharp, cracking like glass. You think you've got me? You're suspended. You're finished. No one's going to believe a washed-up cop and his mutt. The word mutt hit the air like a challenge. Rex's growl rumbled low, primal, a warning born of instinct and memory. His body tensed, ears flat, waiting for the command that didn't come. Daniels's hand trembled slightly. It's over. You don't have to make it worse. Lightning flashed, and in that blinding second, Harlan's hand twitched, the gun rising. Rex, down! Daniels shouted. The gun fired. The world shattered into motion, a deafening crack, a flash of muzzle flame. The bullet ripped through the air and tore across Daniels' shoulder. He staggered back, a strangled sound escaping his throat. Rex lunged. He hit Harlan with a force that sent them both sprawling across the wet concrete. The gun clattered away, skidding beneath a pile of half-burned papers. Harlan screamed, thrashing as Rex's teeth bared inches from his throat. But the dog didn't strike. Not this time. He pressed his weight down, growling low, eyes burning with controlled fury. Every muscle trembled with the restraint of training. Daniels dropped to one knee, clutching his shoulder. Blood pulsed hot between his fingers, mingling with the rain. He blinked hard, his vision blurring, but he managed a hoarse whisper. Good boy. Stay. Outside, the distant wail of sirens began to rise, faint at first, then swelling, echoing through the docks. Harlan froze. His chest heaved as realization set in, the sound of approaching law enforcement. The one thing he couldn't charm, couldn't bribe, couldn't silence. "You won't prove anything," he spat, his voice breaking. "It's gone. It's all gone." Daniels looked at him, half smiling through the pain. "Then why are you so afraid?" Rex barked once, sharp, commanding, insistent. His nose turned toward the dock where Harlan's black sedan sat idling, half hidden by the storm. Daniels frowned. "What is it, boy?" Rex barked again, tugging slightly on Harlan's soaked jacket, then running toward the car. Daniels forced himself to his feet, staggering after him. The pain in his arm burned, but he followed. Something about Rex's urgency, that sharp, unshakable instinct, told him this wasn't over. Rex circled the car, nose pressed to the frame. Then he stopped at the rear door and barked, pawing at the panel. Daniels squinted through the rain. The car looked ordinary, but Rex wouldn't move. He pressed his paw again, harder this time, against a section just below the window. Daniels stepped closer, wiping rain from his eyes. "You're saying it's inside?" He searched the doorframe with his uninjured hand. Then he felt it. A faint groove, almost invisible. He pried at it with his knife. The panel popped loose. Behind it, a compartment. Inside, wrapped in plastic and bound with tape, lay the things Harlan had tried to erase. Reed's police IDs, a bundle of account files, the silver medal Daniels had last seen in the precinct display case, and a small, half-empty bottle of cologne. That scent hit him immediately. The same fragrance that had lingered in the courtroom, in the evidence room, in every moment where truth had tried to surface. Daniels stared at it, rainwater dripping from his chin. "You kept everything," he said softly. "You took his name, his honor, and you kept it like a trophy." Harlan's voice broke behind him. "You don't understand." Daniels turned, eyes burning. "No, you don't." The sirens were close now. Flashing red and blue lights painted the wet dock in streaks of color, cutting through the smoke. Lieutenant Briggs was the first out of the car, shouting orders. "Secure the perimeter! Weapons down!" He stopped cold when he saw Daniels, bloodied, soaked, and Rex standing guard over the trembling lawyer. "Jesus Christ," Briggs whispered. "What did you do?" Daniels didn't answer. He didn't need to. Rex barked once. That same sharp, declarative sound that had once silenced a courtroom. Then he stepped aside, nose pointing toward the open car door. Briggs followed his gaze. When he saw the hidden compartment, his face drained of color. He reached in slowly, pulling out the medal, the IDs, the bottle. His voice was barely a whisper. "Reed," Rex barked again, softer this time. Not warning, not anger, but acknowledgement. Briggs looked at Daniels, eyes full of something between guilt and awe. "You were right." Daniels let out a breath that sounded like release and collapse all at once. His knees gave way, the pain finally overtaking him. "Daniels!" Briggs shouted, running forward. But before anyone could reach him, Rex was already there, pressing close, whining softly. His head nudged Daniels's chest, as if trying to keep his heartbeat steady. "You did good, partner," Daniels whispered weakly, hand finding Rex's fur. His vision dimmed, the edges of the world blurring into streaks of light and rain. "Stay," he murmured, the word trembling on his lips. "Stay with me." Rex whined again, licking the blood from his hand. Then, faint footsteps on the dock. Through the storm came a small voice, fragile but clear. "Officer Daniels?" "Emily." She ran forward, clutching a soaked photograph against her chest, the same one she'd held so many nights before. Her hair stuck to her face, her eyes wide with terror. She dropped to her knees beside them, tears mixing with the rain. "Rex!" The dog turned to her instantly, pressing his head into her shoulder. She hugged him tightly, sobbing. Briggs crouched beside them, lowering his voice. "We've got medics coming. He's going to be all right." Emily shook her head, still clutching the photo. "Daddy's proud of you," she whispered. Not sure if she meant Daniel's, or the dog, or both. Rex stayed there, motionless, one paw still resting on Daniel's chest, guarding him the way he always had. And as the lights flashed, and the sirens wailed, and the storm finally began to fade, truth, long buried, long silenced, stood in the open air at last. The man who lied was taken away. The man who fell was lifted up. And the dog who remembered never moved, never blinked, never let go. The rain had stopped weeks ago, but the scent of it still lingered, clean, distant, like something washed away but not forgotten. The courtroom looked different now. The same oak benches, the same faint hum of fluorescent lights, yet the air no longer felt heavy. It was lighter, like a space that had finally exhaled. A shaft of sunlight broke through the tall windows, dust motes drifting lazily through it. For once, this place didn't smell like tension or fear. It smelled faintly of paper, leather, and redemption. At the defense table sat Harlan, wrists bound, head bowed. The arrogance that had once gleamed in every gesture was gone. His face was drawn and pale, eyes hollow from nights without sleep. The weight of his own choices hung visibly on him, like a shadow that refused to leave. The judge's gavel tapped lightly. This court finds the defendant, Richard Harlan, guilty on all counts: identity theft, fraud, and falsification of police records. Murmurs rippled through the room. Cameras clicked. But no one cheered. The sound that filled the air wasn't triumph. It was relief. The truth had finally come home. At the back of the room, Daniel sat quietly. A sling supported his healing arm, and the faint limp in his leg spoke of both injury and survival. His uniform jacket was gone. A simple gray coat hung from his shoulders. But even without the badge, the way he carried himself still whispered officer. Beside him, Rex lay calmly, his coat brushed to a shine, his amber eyes steady and alert. Every now and then, Daniels reached down to rest his hand on the dog's back, a gesture of thanks, of faith, of something that went deeper than words. When the judge called for the final witness, the room turned its gaze toward the small figure walking down the aisle. Emily. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair neatly tied back, timed 400 malmons. In her hands, she held a small box, weathered, old, but carefully kept. The sound of her shoes on the tile floor echoed softly, like a heartbeat guiding her forward. She climbed the witness stand, standing taller than her 10 years, her eyes finding the judge's. "Your Honor," she said, voice steady though quiet. "I just want to say thank you for listening." The judge nodded kindly. "You've been very brave, Miss Reed." She looked toward Harlan, not with anger, but with something almost gentler, a kind of sad understanding no child should have to carry. "My dad always said people can lose their way, but he also said truth doesn't go away. It just waits for someone to find it again. Her small hands opened the box. Inside lay Reed's medal, the one that had been stolen, hidden, and now returned. The metal gleamed softly under the courtroom lights, as though time itself had been polished clean. Emily stepped down from the stand and crossed the floor. Every step she took seemed to echo through the room's silence. When she reached Rex, she knelt, smiling through her tears. "You helped find it," she whispered, slipping the ribbon gently around his neck. "You helped find him." Rex stayed perfectly still, head lowered, as if understanding the ceremony. A soldier receiving an honor long overdue. The medal caught the sunlight and shimmered faintly against his fur. From the back row, Daniel's vision blurred. He blinked hard, but it didn't stop the tears. He looked away for a moment, swallowing the ache rising in his chest. Beside him, a man who had seen too much and lost too much let himself cry quietly. Not for grief this time, but for grace. When the gavel struck again, marking the end of the case, people began to move, the sound of footsteps filling the space. But Daniels stayed seated. He watched Emily walk toward him, Rex padding at her side, the metal still glinting softly in the light. She stopped in front of him. "They said you can come back now," she said. Eyes bright. "To the department. They said they were wrong." Daniel smiled faintly. "Yeah? Maybe. We'll see." Emily frowned. "You should. They need people who listen." He chuckled softly. The kind of laugh that comes when a wound finally begins to heal. "You might be right, kiddo." Then Rex moved closer, pressing his head into Daniels's knee. The gesture was the same as always, loyal, grounding, wordless. Daniels stroked his fur slowly. "Guess we did it," he murmured. "You, me, and her dad." Rex looked up, ears flicking at the mention of Reed's name. His tail thumped once. Daniels looked toward the windows. The storm outside had long passed, but the street still glistened with its memory. Sunlight streamed through the glass, painting lines of gold across the floor, one stretching perfectly across Rex's paws. For a moment, everything stopped. The hum of voices, the scrape of chairs, the shuffle of paperwork. Only that light remained, soft, pure, unwavering. The judge, packing his notes, glanced toward them. His tone softened as he said, almost to himself, "Justice sometimes comes in unexpected voices." No one spoke after that. They didn't have to. Later, as the courtroom emptied, Daniels walked outside with Emily and Rex. The air smelled clean, like new beginnings. Pigeons scattered across the courthouse steps as sunlight warmed the concrete. Emily slipped her hand into Daniels's, the other resting lightly on Rex's head. "Do you think Daddy can see us?" she asked. Daniels looked at her, then at the dog, then up at the sky. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think he never stopped." Rex tilted his head, ears twitching as if hearing something beyond human range. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain, of earth, and of the past finally laid to rest. Daniels smiled. "Come on, partner," he said softly. "Let's go home." Closing narration. A dog doesn't speak our language, but sometimes he's the only one telling the truth. The camera would fade out there, on a German shepherd sitting proudly in the sunlight, the metal gleaming on his chest, his eyes calm and knowing. Beside him, a little girl smiles, and the man who almost lost everything walks beside them both. Not as a hero, not as a savior, but as a man who finally listened to what the truth had been trying to say all along. And for the first time in a long time, the world felt quiet. Not empty, just peaceful. Sometimes, the most honest love doesn't come in words. It comes in the steady gaze of a loyal dog who never stops believing in you. German shepherds like Rex remind us that loyalty isn't taught, it's felt. They stand beside us through storms, through silence, and through the moments when the world forgets who we are. And somehow, they remind us who we've always been. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt that quiet understanding, that bond beyond language, maybe this is a good time to nurture it a little more. There's a wonderful resource I've been using myself that helps deepen that connection and understand what our dogs are really trying to tell us. I'll leave the link below. No pressure. Just something I think you might truly enjoy exploring at your own pace. Because in the end, love like theirs asks for nothing, except that we listen back.